Unrehearsed Creepypasta Narrations Part 8. The Backrooms. It was approximately 12:15 when I entered the Johnson County Community Health Clinic. I was there for an appointment I had set up weeks ago. Just a routine checkup. It wasn't a new place for me. I had been there for a couple times before. However, the place had an odd nostalgic feel to it, as if it were the location from my childhood, or something. I could never pinpoint exactly what this feeling was, or where it came from. As I walked in, an overwhelming feeling of deja vu swept over me. The hum of the flickering fluorescent lights, the white tile floor, the muted beige paint that colored the walls. I noticed there was a TV mounted in the corner. A smaller, flat screen that was playing a short PowerPoint slideshow on a loop of ads and events that were being held by the clinic. I passed the empty waiting area, a small area of the main room with magazines, children's playthings, and blue cushioned chairs, and approached the woman at the front desk. She was sitting in her bluish-gray office chair, looking at a spreadsheet on the same Windows XP desktop they've had since 2008. There was a sign-in sheet on the counter in front of me. "I have an appointment with Dr. Pebbins," I asked. "What time?" 12:30, I replied. She began typing something into her keyboard. "Ah, yes," she responded. "Gary Johnston?" "Uh-huh." "Yes, I'll tell the doctor. Please fill this out." She handed me a clipboard which held a simple fill-out form. I walked back to the waiting area, took a seat, and began to fill out the form. I was about halfway done with filling in my information when I slumped back in my chair. I hadn't gotten much sleep the night prior, and I was exhausted. As I slumped back, I noticed something very peculiar. My head never hit the wall. In fact, it felt like it went in. I got up, quite frightened, and looked at the wall. Nothing. Not a single hole or dent had been made in the wall by my head. So I reached to touch the wall, and my fingers went through it. I recoiled in shock. What the hell was that? I thought as I reached to touch the wall again, only to find my fingers slipped through once more. Then suddenly, I lost my balance, tripped, and fell directly through the wall. I fell face first on some dirty tan carpeting. Upon getting back up, I realized that I was in a completely different room. Well, not really a room per se, more so a set of rooms, all of which connected by openings. The walls were covered in gross tan patterned wallpaper. There was also an overwhelming stench of moist carpet. I turned back around and tried to put my hand back through the wall, and it wouldn't go through. "Okay, what the fuck?" I muttered. I looked back into the room. There were no windows, no doors, nothing on the walls, other than that disgusting wallpaper, of course. It was completely empty. Aside from a singular plastic blue school chair, at this point the only thing going through my mind was fear, and the repeating thought of, "I need to leave," on loop in my head. I started running through the rooms, desperately trying to find an exit, but to no avail. There was no exit. Was this my permanent location until I died? No, there had to be a way out. I wasn't just going to be left here, right? Eventually somebody would notice I was gone. But nobody did. Then in the distance I heard footsteps, but not those of a human, at least not a normal human. Alongside the footsteps was a gurgling snarl, like that of an angry animal. I began to run. I ran as fast as I could from whatever the hell was approaching me. I didn't want anything to do with it. I ran for what seemed like forever, but I was always back in the same room I started. At least it looked like the same room. Not that I could tell them apart. So I sat down, defeated. A feeling of dread filled my body as I started to cry. I was going to die here. I'm still there. I haven't left. I've accepted my fate. In fact, I can actually hear footsteps. I wonder who that is. I think I want to read a little bit more about the lore of this, because there was stuff up here about it. Okay, Okay, the backrooms origins. Okay, there's more up here. Okay, the backrooms is a relatively recent example of internet folklore that is still expanding its scope in mythology. Essentially, the backrooms posit the existence of a place that people can slip or no-clip into and become lost or trapped. An unreality behind a parallel to this reality. The backrooms are not inherently sinister on first viewing, as they appear to be simply unoccupied office space of a banal vanilla walls, along corridors and ugly carpets. The terrifying element comes with the idea of finding yourself unable to escape, trapped in a labyrinth of these corridors that is unending and eternal, meaning that there is no exit, and that anyone finding themselves in this other dimension will be confined to them perpetually. There is also the added detail that there are others, or other things, of apparently malevolent nature in this environment with you, and that every moment you remain inside, you run the risk of encountering one of these denizens of the other place. The backrooms origins, like many creepypasta notions or ideas, the backrooms mythos evolved from an emphatic exercise. That is, it was a response to a piece of art inspired by a single image. This is a common occurrence in the creepypasta community, with notable creepypasta stories such as Slenderman, The Rake, and even The Russian Sleep finding their origins in a disturbing image for which a fictional backstory was then proposed. On May 12, 2019, the original backrooms image of a corridor with an oppressively bright strip light, manila walls, and no furniture was posted 4chan's /x /paranormal board in response to a request for images that were unsettling or which just felt a bit off. The image had initially been posted on 4chan, discussion about cursed images anonymously, about a year earlier, April 21st, 2018, with no accompanying text. This is the first known posting of the image itself. Neither the identity of question poser or the person who responded with this image in 2019 posting is known, but we do know that it was from the posting that the backrooms mythos was born, and it was on this posting that the image first paired with the brief explanatory text. The text which read, "If you're not careful, and you no-clip out of reality in the wrong areas, you'll end up in the backrooms, where it's nothing but the stink of old moist carpet, the madness of mono yellow, the endless background noise of fluorescent lights, and maximum humbuzz, and approximately 600 million square miles of randomly segmented empty rooms to be trapped in. God save you if you hear something wandering around nearby, because it sure as hell has heard you." Created in those few short sentences enough background and suggestion to kickstart other creators into using the backrooms as a setting for their own stories and as a starting point for an exercise in a world/mythos building. The initial pairing of text with the image is interesting in a number of ways. Firstly, it claims knowledge, not only of the dimensions, but the features of this place. It also suggests the idea that something in this setting would hear you, giving the impression that you are not alone. Following the meeting of the image with text, the idea of the backrooms quickly spread, appearing first another thread on the /x/ with the text and image combined on May 14th of the same year. Then in the /r/ green text where it was proclaimed to be worse than any creepypasta out there, and gained a great deal of visibility and acclaim. By May 18th, the creepypasta based upon the concept had been posted by your D&D guy, with Twitter users posting animations of wandering through the infinite backrooms. Development of mythos. As the concept of backrooms has developed, so too have perspectives and opinions about precisely what backrooms are, their nature, structure, and their occupants. Despite only being in its infancy as an idea, the backrooms has already fractured into different camps that operate almost like denominations of a religion, with contributors clustering around or agreeing to parameters that meet within their own particular definition or belief in what the backrooms are, how they work, and what the role of the collaborative community of myth builders should be to them. These denominations can be divided into three broad camps. For example, the subreddit True Backrooms come across as orthodox purists, concerned less with the potential for myth building provided by the concept and more with the feeling of unease associated with the initial image and text combination. In their mind, creating additional levels or explaining the various rooms or possible inhabitants of the back rooms makes things far too explicit, complex, and unwieldy, especially as there would be no quality of control upon those who contribute a level of or an entity dwelling in this group's shared fictional space. To this end, their discussions and posts center around the notion that there are no levels. There is simply the back room, which is 600 million square miles you would think are quite spacious enough without having to add extra levels and structures. The images and ideas they post are intended to recreate the same sense of unease as the first post. To these contributors, it is an unending uniformity. The unimaginable scale and inexplicable existence of the backrooms that is terrifying in and of itself. The other additions being superfluous and embellishments. There is an argument to be made there, as there is a consistent dilemma within the world of horror, literature, and cinema surrounding exactly how much or how little of the malevolent entity or idea should be known in order for a story to be most effective. Whilst creature features in gore-fest movies make the horrific element explicit and expose everything, many argue that the most affecting horror creations are those that are simply suggestive, or about which the details are sparse, allowing the reader to fill in the blanks. There is certainly an element of this in the initial post, with the unexplained madness of Mono Yellow being reminiscent of Lovecraft's wording, whilst the infinite and unimaginable scale of the backrooms gives a huge nod to his concept of cosmic horror and man's insignificance in this eldritch location. The use of the suggestive word something rather than anything specified or clearly described thing, meanwhile, leaves the possibilities wide open in a style akin to the work of M.R. James. Incidentally, the use of yellow as an ominous color is a common theme in literature, with the most notable example being The King in Yellow by Chambers, The Yellow Wallpaper by Gilman, and the idea of a wicked yellow book turning up the eyebrows, and the picture of Dorian Gray. Interestingly, this group also seems to be against the addition of entities, almost because to name, identify, or categorize the presence hinted in this initial post would be to rob it of its impact. Another school of thought, the backrooms, suggests the idea of levels within this realm, and that ending up on a specific level can give anyone unfortunate enough to end up there an entirely different experience. Though those posting the idea of levels disagree as to exactly how many and the nature of them. One school of thought, the three-level system, operates on the assumption that, just as the name implies, there are three levels to the backrooms, with the famous endless corridors of mono yellow featured. Initial picture is only one of them. A post to r/backrooms in June of 2019 explained the nature of the other two levels. Increasingly industrial, with the third being the most dangerous. And this was adapted to a visual guide posted to DeviantArt Ladder the same month. Then there are those that adhere to the Anything Goes extended lore system, which runs with the idea that the backrooms being infinite means there's an infinite number of levels, with the contents of space in those levels being limited only by the contributor's imagination. It is naturally in this third category that the wildest expansions of the mythos, including various entities and groups of entities, monsters, and exploratory organizations, have been added to the lore. There are of course many sites in which backrooms mythology is accepted, irrespective of the partisan views on what does or does not constitute canon, with the fiction/images being accepted no matter which school the contributor happens to belong to, though the interaction between these three views and the endless possibilities makes the backrooms mythos an unwieldy thing to pin down, which some might argue is perfectly fitting. The backrooms influences. In addition, to the above-mentioned literary influences that can be seen in the first snatch of text attached to the image, various other influences and considerations such be noted. The concept of a labyrinth, inhabited by a creature or thing that means harm, can be found as far back as Greek myth, with the story of Theseus and the Minotaur, in which King Minos builds a gigantic labyrinth designed by Daedalus, father of the unfortunate Icarus, from the other famous myth, in which, to house the half-man, half-bull creature, the Minotaur, brave warriors would enter the labyrinth, become lost, and eventually be hunted and killed by the creature. The haunting nature of the corridors that go on forever, and the strangely unsettling nature of corporate or uniform buildings, such as hotels, and one exploited by Stephen King, famously in The Shining, and also in 1408. The ever-continuing or shifting location with no way out can be seen in the Matrix films, which can also features a reality outside of their own. By the way, I know that it's not really part of this, but I would like to mention the Cube movies. There's like 3 or 4 of them. There's like Hypercube and Zero Cube and The Cube. It's an old series of movies in the 80s and 90s about a giant cube-based prison that governments would just throw in political dissidents, and it became increasingly more sci-fi / paranormal. And the Blair Witch Project, with the characters seemingly repeating loops in the same area over and over. The larger concept of a place paralleled or outside of time in which human beings can be condemned has obviously been a feature of major religions for centuries, and the levels idea bears some resemblance to the idea of hell having several levels. However, the closest equivalent to the original idea posted by the Backrooms A photo is that of purgatory or limbo, a place that is neither heaven nor hell, but a stage in between. A place of nothingness that was part of Catholic doctrine. For many centuries it was said to be where the unbaptized go after death. This state is not in and of itself threatening, but which is menacing in its extent, the fact that it goes on forever, and there is no escape. It is similar in concept to limbo, but presents it in a very modern way. It is worth noting that the location for which the initial photo was taken has not yet been convincingly identified, which is a testament to its bland, inoffensive cookie-cutter uniformity. Some suggested that it shows a location in Montana, whilst others have argued that it is not an actual real-life location at all, but rather an image created using a computer algorithm. Speaking of computers, it is worth mentioning that the verb noclip, first used by John Carmack, comes from computer games, and is essentially a process by which collision detection in the game is bypassed, meaning a character can walk through walls and objects that would usually be solid, meaning they can move between levels in a game without having to complete their current level in a conventional way. In the case of the backrooms, the idea would be that a human could noclip from their perceived reality and into this other dimension, which, considering the idea that the physicists believe there are multiple or even infinite dimensions, with some even arguing that our reality itself might be a simulation, is a terrifying thought, which has great potential as a storytelling device. Finally, it is worth considering, as some have suggested, that the original image posted in response to a call for unsettling images could have been meant ironically or as a representation of a wasted life. The idea behind this depressing suggestion being that the poster uploaded the image of this banal and nondescript location in response to a request for images that were unsettling, or a bit off because it depicted a life of boredom and monotony, in a joyless corporate environment that, because of its repetitive nature, seems like a prison that goes on and on forever. What could be more unsettling than that?